Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Glad you guys can be here tonight. It's Friday. I wanted to talk to you about Communitarianism by Nikki Raapano. And it'll be the last particular chapter of the book here called A Canadian Perspective. And again, my channel is Discerning What is True. I am actually on Facebook. I'm actually on YouTube and also on Odyssey. Um, this is a kind of a this particular book is a very eye-opening book, folks. They've uh, they've, they've come in here with their fancy ideas and have told you they're going to do this and this and that for you. That is all their make-believe, what I would call what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's a word that basically they're utopian ideas. And in reality, simply, it's going to be it's not going to be a utopian world. It's going to be quite the opposite. It's going to be a dystopia, quite the opposite. So, unfortunately, Nikki's no longer with us. And she put in a lot of hours and time. Uh, what we would call someone from the grassroots. She's not what we call, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm making it very clear. She picked up the ball and she ran with it. She grabbed a hold of the tiger by the tail. And I don't see anybody else out here even talking about this whole area of communication. I mean, the whole idea is what's being promoted as communitarianism. Um, I hope to do some more work on this particular area myself, looking into a particular professor who I have a hard time pronouncing his name, which is a professor at George Washington University. Um, and we've talked about him on other videos, actually from Nikki Raapano. And in reality, simply is that very few of us know who this guy is. He's in the backworks. But he's part of this whole thing of communitarians. He's the one who's actually is the drive behind it. And he is 94 years old. And a lot of these ideas that are being promoted these days are basically from old folks, old men who are trying to push their utopian ideas, which is not going to be utopia for us. It's going to be quite the opposite. You can see that framework actually taking place already around you, not only here in the United States, but also in Western Europe. And most people are unaware this particular attack is against the civilization of the West. It's also headed towards other countries, don't get me wrong. And I mean Africa, South America, such and such. But the main thing they want to do is to destroy the West at this time. So let's get into the meat of what she shares. And I appreciate you being here. And if you have some questions, I'll try to answer them at the end of the show here. Thank you for being here. So this particular chapter is called 2020, A Canadian Perspective by Paul Barnes, Barnes. So let's get into the writing that she shares here. In Canada, we have a long history of community and strong desire for improved social conditions, and many people and groups work tirelessly to this ends. So when I first learned of communitarianism, I thought this doesn't sound so bad. Who doesn't want a safe and caring community? Maybe this is the answer. But further research, however, revealed that the philosophy unchallenged communitarianism equals caring community implication does not entirely encompass what this movement is all about. It has been my experience that most believe that a communitarian is just another word that describes a person who believes in and pursues the goals that create a safe, caring, and more inclusive community. This is a warm and fuzzy sounding word, you see, but seriously skewed, S-K-E-W-E-D, skewed. Characterizations of communitarianism is never really properly challenged by people that are truly in the know and for good reason. I think if people had a better understanding of the true nature and the consequences and ultimate outcomes of their perceived upright and honorable efforts, I am quite sure that most would think twice before contributing. At the very least, they would be afforded an informed choice was switched to consider the risks of spinning away our precious currency of selfhood and individual power. Communitarianism is a devolution, that is a decentralization of power out of the hands of the individual citizens into a group dynamic that favors collective rights or laws of the common good over the rights and powers of the individual in society. This devotion of power, as it has been termed by many, has also placed much power in the hands of appointed groups in society. We have to be very cautious not to just plug into any ideology and plan that purposely removes our fundamental rights as individuals just because it sounds nice and seemingly smart. People say it's a good thing. So I'm going to say something here, interject something here, because it's very key. Is I've been studying some of this stuff from different writers. This is not by happenstance. This is a whole war against individual rights, the rights of man. This is what it's all about. And it's a satanic type of system. It's demonic in many ways because they've been very clever at what they're doing. Why would and this is a question you got to ask yourself, why would the well-to-do people, that is the people who control this planet, who actually own probably 95 to 96% of what's on this planet, do something of this nature? Because this is what they're pushing. They're going for what I would call the juggler. They're going for it all. They're seeking to put. We already are slaves in this society as it is, folks. And one thing you must ask yourself this question: why do we have to work in order to pay for anything on this planet? Why, oh, why do we have to pay for something on this planet? Why do we have property rights? Property taxes. Why do we have income taxes? Why do we have taxes on anything and everything? You see, government doesn't make anything, folks. They don't create anything. They just take. They just continue to take from others. And most people are willing, they're willing to do this. They would like their fellow man to pay more taxes. When I came here to South Carolina in 1975, the sales tax in South Carolina was 4%. I don't know what it is for the state at this point. I haven't looked at this. I'm assuming it's 6 or 7%. But the town I live in here, where I'm at, if you actually shop into the city, it's 9%. Where's all this money going to, folks? And we know this simply is that the government itself cannot handle its money rightly. And again, we keep pouring more money into these programs and they don't work. They just don't work, folks. Let's go to the 60s with the great plans of Johnston, the Great Society, and the guns and butter deals we talked about in political science when I was in college. The guns were simply just fighting the Soviets, the communism that was going on across the world. And yet we were such an industrial society that we could do this and also provide what we call butter, which would be basically helping the people who could not find work or just needed help. We were able to do that also. And we did that for a while. And then they kind of began to catch up with us when basically I would say the start of the 1980s. And we gradually have been descending ever since. So the Great Society program has not worked. And in reality, simply is communism has not taken over the world, the big bad wolf, so to speak, but it's actually socialism, which is tied to the Fabians. They're the ones who've actually done the work. And they've done it by stealth. They've come into this country basically in the late 1800s. And they've been continuously fighting and working their way in it to actually displace the Constitution of this country to the point where the Constitution is hollow now because they created more laws or legalese that actually overstep the Constitution, when reality simply is they don't even regard it as important anymore, you see. So my point simply is that why would you trust anybody who's already ripped you off so many times? And most people are not aware that simply is that they're rulers. They think that their rulers are here in the United States. But really, folks, they're just puppets. Mainly, a lot of them are just simply puppets and do what they are told to do. It's a pecking order, you see. And a lot of them get off on this simply because they have a position or they want to be in history. I was the president, such and such. My name was Jimmy Carter, da da da, or George Bush or Ronald Reagan, whatever. And but they're told what to do, you see. So let's get into this part here. I'm going to continue on. And I'm trying to think of there's a Newt Gingrich is part of this, what they call a third way. It's called the third wave, WAVE. And I'm trying to think of the author. I can't think of his name right now. And the books are actually in my library, a couple of them. And this is their plan, you see, to bypass the Constitution. If the Constitution is the law of the land and you want to abolish, quote unquote, guns in this country, then take up a constitutional amendment and do it, you see. Because what you're doing, these people are doing this, they're sidestepping the Constitution. They're not even obeying the Constitution. They're not worthy to be leaders of your country or be authorities, because reality simply is we are the authority, you see. We need to hold these people to the fire, because simply is they're not doing it, you see. If they want to get rid of guns, get a constitutional amendment. Do it. Because they can't do it, you see. And they're actually bypassing also even the centralized government, the federal government, that is, too. But anyway, I'm kind of got off on a tangent here. So let's get back to what he was saying here. In an article entitled The Third Way, Marketing Mirage or Trojan Horse, Patrick Basham, B-A-S-H-A-M, of the Fraser Institute, quoting Samuel Britton, B-R-I-T-T-A-N, writes, "The danger of communitarianism is that of attributing superior value to the collective entities over and above the individual who compose. This disastrous era was made respectable by the teachings of Hegel and reached its apotheosis in the state worship of the Nazis and the communist regimes." What other group actually, think about this, folks? What other group of all the groups that are, people on this planet, what group actually works as a collective? I'll give you a hint. It's in the Middle East. It's an area that once was owned or actually ruled by the Palestinians at one time, no longer. That's the group. That's the group that's harming this whole planet. It's called collectivism. And most other people on this planet do not work as collectivists. This is a part of their whole plan here, you see. It's not about individual rights anymore. And if you don't have individual rights or your freedoms, you really don't have anything, folks. So I wanted to explain to you that. Now let me explain, let's go on to the part of the book here, so I won't keep you from what I'm sharing here. Throwing caution to the wind based on the belief that we as species have finally grown up and are mature enough to collectively enter a new era, world order, or coercively cooperation in an egoless utopian society void of protections for the individual is naive and is very dangerous. As Britain has clearly alluded, there exists many historical instances to bear this out. Look around you and ask yourself, is humanity now so tremendously enlightened, so accepting of each other's differences? Have we become so interdependent as a planet that none of us could reform or corrupt the process and quickly turn to social terraforming experiment of the intellectual elite to a dictatorship nightmare, the likes of which we have never before experienced? Part of these things we've seen, actually, as he gives an illustration here, is that what has happened here in the last 100 years, that is to do with the Soviet Union and also to do with Nazi Germany. This naivety is a childish dream, folks, the stuff of sci-fi, and fantasyland comic books. To be honest, I expected more from upper academia and my elected public servants, especially here in Canada, a country that is supposed to be so politically aware and astute. When we permit decisions to be made on our behalf that alter the protective legal framework built up over decades for the whims and the fantasies of a minority of the intellectual elite, we gamble with our freedom and risk the very foundation of our free society as a whole. It is dangerous to allow ourselves to become subject to the whims at the behest of appointed and unaccountable individuals, many of whom have a clear stake in the outcome of the experiment. We will lose our due process and over time our independence. The following is a blog post of mine that illustrates this point in response to Christopher Booker, Booker, article in the UK Telegram entitled Judges Rule Out Recompense for the Innocent. A recent decision of the High Court has blown a gaping new hole in our criminal justice system. If government officials wrongfully arrest you for a crime you didn't commit, then imprison you in a hellish condition for 2 years, you no longer have any rights of redress. You see. My response, welcome to the UN mandated communitarian law. The EU is founded upon it. Look it up. Seemingly all of our old line political parties, and most, if not all of them, municipal governments here in Canada and the US are now on board and willingly or unwittingly bringing this to fruition locally. Do any of you see anything wrong with the following statement made by the city councilor in my ward in his newsletter to the constituents? Enhanced authority for community councils. On the powers newly granted by the province, council approved the transfer of final responsibility for certain local and other routine matters to the respective community councils rather than have them remain subject to ratifications by the full city council. The new local responsibilities include approval of traffic calming measures, naming of streets, residential front yard parking, permit appeals, approval of encroachment, agreements for road, parkways and ravens, boulevard, cafe applications, and appointment of citizens to arena, agency, museum, and business improvement area boards. City council retains the right to make decisions on matters of citywide significance and those that impact more than one community council. I voted for this measure. Can you see it? Or do you see a message of positive change? Do you see more accountability and citizen control of those we elect? Or do you see the real message here? I'm sure you see the enhanced authority part and probably the part about city council retaining the right to make decisions on matters of citywide significance. But if you can see past the spit on your face after reading this, you may have noticed that your power as an individual and as a community now has been transferred to an unelected and city council appointed community council, and to top it off, it's in your face. I voted for this measure, you see, no due process, no redress. Oh, your voice will be heard, make no mistake. Heard but ignored is this new paradigm of groupthink and hive-like decision-making processes of balancing and consenting, building that endeavors to preclude individual rights in favor of a new kind of community using a fairness for all, justice for none system of law, you see. This will eventually lead to a all-encompassing state intervention that will reach into every facet of our daily lives and all under the guise of a greater good that is often toured but very rarely seen or implemented once laws have changed. Do we really trust those given the power to affect our lives and our property enough to give up our due process this way? Subjection is voluntary, you see. As you are probably well aware by now, after reading through this book, that there are many words and phrases used in place of communitarianism, and one of them is the third way. In Canada, the term third way is tossed around a lot these days. Everyone from Ralph Klein, Klein, and his third way healthcare reforms to what has been described as a new social architecture for Canada, in a paper published by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternates. Author and researcher Monica Townsend, Townsson, in a 2004 paper described the third way as a quiet and steadily plan to redress Canada's social programs, a probable and familiar through the back door social policy through stealth. And that's correct, folks. It's through stealth. Townsend cautions that we are already on the road to change and that we may want to keep a watchful eye on the process, as the end results could be the very antithesis of social democratic principles. Think, Tony Blair's third way comes to Canada. So what is the third way movement? The definition of the term third way is a tenuous one, and many people have a very vague idea what it is about or what it really is about, if they have an understanding at all about it. Again, quoting Basham, B-A-S-H-A-M, in his paper, The Third Way, Marketing Mirage or Trojan Horse. Competing for intellectual influence within the third way movement are exponents of communitarianism. This may be observed in, for example, the third way preoccupation with exclusive social and economic inclusion and social involvement being central facets of the communitarian philosophy. Similar, the third way extols a communitarian commitment to civil responsibility, that is, a delineation of the precise range of behaviors for which individuals are appropriately seen as responsible to the community, and which the state may therefore legitimately seek to regulate. It is this context that both Blair and Clinton's speeches often allure to communitarian themes, frequently calling for a better balance between rights and responsibilities. In the third way approach, much has been gleaned from the noted communitarian academia, Amita, Amitai, Etazani, I and we paradigm in the hands of the third way, where the old left overstressed the commitment to collective identity, and the new right to the selfish ego. The third way pays attention to both and attempts to keep them in some kind of balance. So essentially, the third way is the communitarian way. Some would argue that Canada has already embraced the third way, as Prime Minister Harper insinuated during his recent trip to South America in his speech delivered in Peru. While nations are turning towards economic reform and political openness, too often some in this hemisphere are led to believe that their only choices are to return to a syndrome of economic nationalism or political authoritarianism and class warfare, or to become just like the United States. This, of course, utterly nonsense. Canada's very existence demonstrates that the choice is a false one. So this is from an editorial 2007. From Saskatchewan, MLA Pat Lorgie, LRJE, in her 1996 article published in the Canadian Parliamentary Review entitled Communitarianism, A Legislative Perspective, concludes with an eye-opening and revealing statement that says, "It is not easy for anyone, particular politicians, to give up power. We thrive on it. We need it like a drug. But if we truly care about our Canadian society and want to ensure that it does not descend into disparity collectivism of rugged cities or roving tribes, we need to listen to our communities, walk our talk, and devoid our precious control structures. It is dangerous, it is risky, and it is exhilarating. But as John McBride, author of The Careless Society, said so well, there are incredible possibilities if we are willing to fail to be gods." I'll say it again. There are incredible possibilities if we are willing to fail to be gods. Communitarianism, now we're going to another area. Communitarianism is a risk, to be sure, one which I am not willing to take, either through ignorance or lack of deed. It has become quite clear to me that the majority of those we put in public office to do our work have wholeheartedly adopted communitarianism and are implementing it at the same speed that we are willing to accept it, and the manufactured crisis that is served as a side dish, as Laura J. LRJE indicates. This is her statement again. "You do not change the beast all at once. That is a great recipe for a fallen scoffer, as Bob Ray recently discovered. Rather, we work slowly, leading at the falling edges of the community, or vice versa, to involve and engage in communities. The radical alternative is either quickly vote out of power in a democracy such as ours, or is strangely inexorably like the former USSR. So we instill the idea of collectivism, of community, of cooperation slowly. How do we do this? we have aimed for greater participation in community decision-making, and we increased the flexibility of communities to deliver services to meet local needs. More importantly, we work to provide communities with support, skills, and needed legitimacy as we devolve power. What does Largely mean by devolving power? Ostensibly, in giving her the benefit of the doubt, she means to return power to the people where it rightly belongs. But as she also correctly points out in the article, there is an inherent risk to devour power, devolving power, that is. Fast forward to 2008. Time has proven that Largey's cautions to be correct. From local community councils on up to the federal councils, power is indeed being reallocated, but not back to the people, though, who already have the power, but to unaccountable groups, less to checks and balances of traditional governments. Yeah, this is part of the whole apparatus. There's a council here, actually is located here in where I live in South Carolina. It's called the Lower Savannah Council, and it actually is involved with I think it's 5 or 6 counties here. Now, this particular council of government, COG, is actually working in itself, you see. And what they do is they're getting involved. And what they're doing is, what I mean by getting involved, they give money, such and such. Well, where does that money come from? It's not coming from the government, folks. That's what people don't seem to see. It's actually coming from others who want to make changes the way they see it. So they're involved with what I call the small busing system here to take people who are older to the doctors. That's commendable, yes. But the point is simply is, what is happening simply is that you're giving this particular body power, and it gradually will be seeded as a root. And as you put a seed in the ground, and then the seed germinates, and it gradually comes up as a small tree. And as it gets bigger, it becomes basically, it's going to stay there, it's going to steadfast, so that the winds of change or whatever are not going to move it. And this is what happens, folks, because once it gets caught up and people are involved in it for 20 years, then what happens simply is people just accept it, you see. And that's what's happening right now, because it seems to be doing what it's supposed to be doing, but the government's not involved with it, you see. I'm sure the government's giving money, but you can see that this is all, they're councils of governments. COG is what it's called here in South Carolina. Anyway, let me get back to the point here. Given that consensus is admittedly now a managed managed science through facilitation type group manipulation, you can understand how the decentralization of power is placed in the hands of people so unconcerned with your voice. Yes, very much so. Very much so. It's, you used to, when you think about your politician, he would be concerned. The reason why he'd be concerned is simply one reason: he wanted to be elected again. But these people are not going to be elected, folks. Get it? They are so comfortable with their position that they are willing to participate in the defeat of the legal framework that supports our individual rights and equal justice. Therefore, we need to understand and expose the lie that is communitarianism or third way. Ask yourself, why is it necessary to quietly dismantle and then reconstruct the legal and constitutional frameworks of our free nations and have big business, labor, and NGOs working hand in hand with government, which has essentially become their muscle to bring about social change the intellectual elites are deeming absolutely essential. The whole communitarian/third way philosophy is weak, in my opinion, and quite honestly smacks of intellectual sloth and simple-minded compromise. Why do the hard work to find real answers that don't enslave us when you can trade your spine for a compromise with collectivism? And collectivism is all simply Soviet. It's just socialism. That's what it is. There isn't. Is there only individualism? Be an individual or a collectivist. And the free world tends to be what I call individualists. And those who are collectivists are what we call socialists or communists. Communitarians are purchasing an unattainable future with our rights and freedoms and hawking the barriers to tyranny that keeps the animal at bay. We are often referred to by our neighbor to the south as the nanny state, and for good reason. Canada, a country once toured as the true north, strong and free, a phrase who's so indicative of Canada that it was embedded into our national anthem, has become a nation of compromise. We have adopted a new definition of the word freedom. There is another verse in that great hymn that should herald a forewarning to the people of this once great nation, and it is, "From far and wide we stand on guard for thee. Take heed, my friends." Here's another, I'm going to another particular chapter here, common purpose in the UK. This is from a Britain perspective. This is by John Francis Walker. So let's read what he has to share here from our book. We are living at a particular momentous time in history. In order to understand what is happening in Britain in 2010, you first need to know about a political philosophy called communitarianism. Communitarianism, also known as Tony Blair's Third Way, has been implemented by stealth in Britain over the past few years by this new Labour government. Communitarianism is difficult to pin down. It is a strange mixture of capitalism and communism. Communitarians want social control in a collectivist and a corporatist society. B, a type of neo-communism that will owe some of its ideas to Gramsci and the Fabians. Yes. C, and a big brother knows best type of philosophy. You need to look into Antonio Gramsci. He's the one who's in what they've used is the Frankfurt School was involved with him. He's the one who said the way you break, he said what we call the slow march, the long way. That was what they were saying, because simply is it wasn't going to be a victory within when you're battling a military foe. It was going to take years upon years to gradually take over a society and destroy its culture. And they used what we call critical theory to bombard everything that was something wrong with our country here in the United States and say, but they never offered, repeat, never offered a better program or a better idea, folks. C is I'll read this today. So communitarians want to create a postmodern, post-democratic feudal society known as the New World Order, run by a small number of rich and powerful people with everyone else working as peasants. In order to achieve their objectives, they must destroy the middle class and the nation state. And that's what's happening right before our eyes, folks. That's what's happening economically right before your eyes. That's truly what's happening. Look around. All this whole thing in 2020 took over, whatever. There was no COVID-19 virus, period. It was used as a psychological tool to actually fool people and also to close businesses. And those businesses never came back open, especially those that were not what we call in the group. You see, basically mom and pop or small companies, small businesses. What a great way to destroy a country from within. B, group rights dominate over individual rights. Yeah, that's what a part of what we call democracy. It's just clear there. C, highly taxed capitalism merges with social collectivists. So you see how Hegel's ideas have embarked on these. Administered through what they call Quango, Quangos, and fake charities. They call this civil society. The communitarians, through stealth, perseverance, duplicity, and subversion, have snatched individual rights-based democracy right out from under our noses and replaced it with group rights based upon communitarianism, a trendy, innovative, and newish form of communism administrated by foreign elites. They are convinced that the communitarian system is better for society. Improved social cohesion is the central tenet of their political ideology. Obama, Blair, Brown, Madison, etc. are Fabian communitarians, and Cameron and Kleck show distinct communitarian tendencies, although you will not have heard them use the term. Truth of their hidden agenda is now known, and we know their real intentions. These people are frontmen for the New World Order communitarianism. Communitarian policies has been seen as a fascist corporationism, with the primary difference is that instead of focusing on nation states, our country and people is propagates a supernatural policy. A secondary difference is influenced by means of informal social structures, like, for example, common purpose, instead of by institutionalized state violence, at least for the time being. Communitarianism is aimed just like fascism, socialism, and communism as a collective. The interests of the collective always prevails above the interests of the individual. That is correct. Totally 100% correct. Individuals must subject themselves to the common good. Communitarians create imaginary problems such as global warming, terrorism, suppression, and the bank crisis to force through their ideas, and also for COVID-19. Common purpose is a change agent being used to recruit and train the commissars and the apparatchiks needed to implement new labor hidden EU communitarian agenda. In 1973, the UK joined the common market, and in 1975, referendum, the people of Britain were conned into voting in favor of staying in the common market. Prime Minister Heath, whose government entered into the accession treaty, and Prime Minister Wilson, who arranged a referendum, both knew that the common market was simply a stage in the development of the European Union. At some point, those behind the takeover of Britain by the EU realized they needed people whom they could trust to manage the new bureaucracy. Enter common purpose, which was established to recruit and train the commissars and apparatchiks needed to run this bureaucracy. New Labor hidden agenda. Since 1997, the New Labor government has been working to two agendas. Firstly, the open agenda as laid out in their manifestos, and secondly, their hidden agenda. The objective of the hidden agenda of New Labor is the creation of communitarian society controlled by the EU collective. In order to achieve this objective, the New Labor government has been running a parallel administration made of quangos, Quangos, and fake charities. A fake charity is legally a charity, but effectively operates as a government department, receiving a substantial amount of funding directly or indirectly from government and operating as a government department. Common Purpose is a fraudulent educational charity, acting as a change agent and recruiting, and is part of the managemental mechanism being used to carry out this hidden agenda of New Labor. While it's carrying out the hidden agenda of New Labor, Common Purpose has corruptly abused millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. Common Purpose is guilty of defrauding you of your money. Some people think that Common Purpose is simply a criminal organization set up to siphon off public money. There is a lot more than that to the Common Purpose agenda. So what is Common Purpose that is in England? On the surface, Common Purpose is an educational charity registered in the UK under number 1023384 that does leadership and network developing training. However, Common Purpose is not what it appears to be on the surface. In reality, Common Purpose is a corrupt, subversive, secretive, and deeply sinister organization with a hidden agenda: communitarian social control, corporate and EU state control, and hidden backers such as Tavistock Institute, as we talked about it before, shared with you by Dr. John Coleman, and the Fabian Society also, and also Brussels. Next section she talks about here is constitutional law versus communitarian law by Harvella Jones, president of the National Homeowners Advocate Group, LLC. Fasten your seatbelts. You are about to go on the ride of your life. There is real threat to our freedom under constitutional law and is called communitarian law. Maybe some of you already know about this. I heard about it years ago from a member of this group. However, I was in denial for many years until now. When you see what is happening with our laws and the fact that after much publicity about homeowners association abuse, fraud, and various other violations reported to every agency, legislative, city government, and federal agencies such as HUD and FHA, with no action taken. You have to stop and start to believe in the conspiracy theories here, folks. The lack of real action certainly tells you there is something else going on that should be recognized, studied, and believed. I characterize communitarian law as a supernovae that has eclipsed our constitutional rights. I don't have to read every book about it to understand that it has been created to make sure properly and constitutional rights as we now know them will one day be a dream. Some things have been eased into us while we were asleep. It is time to wake up and smell the mattress. The groundwork for communitarian law has been on the drawing board for years, and there are many artists. Do yourself a favor and make sure this article gets into the desktop of many people, and possibly because you are about to get educated. And that may be the one thing that could stop this communitarian law virus from destroying our freedom currently enjoyed by Americans and protected by our Constitution. I am not just talking about your state constitution. I'm talking about the United States Constitution as well. According to an article I just read entitled, "What is Communitarian Law?" What was brought to my attention by a friend who sent this website, which was from, um, sorry, from Nikki Raapano and her daughter. Communitarian law is also community law. The article by Nikki Raapano starts off by saying, before you form an opinion about a new act of Congress or revision to municipal codes that will somehow modify the laws designed to protect you, your family, your land, your home, and your resources, listen first for the buzzword, balancing. Balancing. The article states, and please be seated when you read this paragraph, communitarian laws are always called a necessity balancing that furthers the common good. Communitarianism is the foundation for the establishment of a global federation. Communitarian law, by definition, is always supreme law, you see. The law itself requires member states in the United Nations, that is, all 192 of them, to modify their political and legal structures to comply with global law. Nothing can exist that contradicts communitarian law, such as national state constitutional law. So let's just stop right here. So we're talking about constitutional law here in this country since let's just say 1776, for example. So we're looking at something that's been established over 200 years ago. And if you look at it, it's basically about 250 years now. But we're on the crest, what I would call that being destroyed. And most people are upset because basically we have what I would call out of control spending, and congressmen, this and that, such and such, but they're actually spending money they don't have. And that's how they use this also, saying you can make this thing work. But what's happened simply is we have been asleep at the wheel and not actually put our congressmen on deal and say, I see what you're doing over here, and I don't like it. You see. Now, let me explain something, and I'm not saying it's fair. I'm just saying simply there is an opportunity to throw someone out of office based upon that, you see. But this, and I'm saying there's less chance, but with this, there's no chance of throwing anybody out of office. And I'm not saying it's a guarantee even you will throw out some of these people, but I would say simply is this: you won't have the opportunity to throw anybody out with this. Let's go on. Association is here. Explains it is the Court of Justice of Luxembourg, which has this power, based currently on the texts of the different treatises of Amsterdam, and also Maastricht, Maastricht, and Nice, Nice. When the European Constitution is adopted, it will serve as its basis. Its content is therefore vital. Everything concerning communitarian law comes under the Court of Justice of Luxembourg. That's interesting. It's Luxembourg is like a kingdom there. It's a small little country. Liechtenstein's another one. Andorra is another one. And I think one other country there is a small, but they're little, what I call fiefdoms. Anyway, I've gotten off this tangent here, but what I want to say simply is that this has been written, quite a years ago, at least 10 years ago, if not more. I believe that basically the European Union has probably already bid into this and taken it. I don't know for sure. Communitarian law is the justice system for the emerging world government. The law was introduced across the world the law was introduced across the world very slowly in what is often called incremental stages or gradualism. This new law regulates all nations and their citizens who are engaged in the global free market. It represents the interests of the corporate community in each former nation. The new law balances, that is, overrules all national law that conflicts with the expanding sustainable development of war on terror, rebuilding community agenda, see Agenda 21. If you have been following homeowners advocate issues on this website and elsewhere in the news over the years, you probably know that we have force-fed legislators the Constitution in regard to the permanent stopping homeowners association foreclosures, with basically no success so far. Now, can you imagine what kind of society we will have with no constitutional rights? While legislators appear to think we have no constitutional rights now, we actually still do have a morphing of a communitarian law has not totally wiped out our constitutional laws yet. More readings of the What is a Communitarian Law articles yields that in order for everyone to evolve into a global citizen, everyone must first embrace global communitarian values. These values are the exact opposite of liberty and justice for all. Communitarian values requires an agreement to allow the sacrifice of common-born individuals for the common good. Common-born people have no choice in whether or not they become the actual sacrifice individuals. Most ignorant commoners can be convinced they are not in the common-born category. Each citizen is made to think their group are the chosen people, chosen for something really special, like saving the world, bringing world peace. This new balancing of capitalism and communism is the final corruption of the basic principle for freedom established by the American colonial revolution in the 18th century. Introduced to the world in the mid-18th century by European scholars, theologians, and aristocrats. Today, communitarianism is sold to the masses under the guise of more moral and political correct thinking. That political correct thinking, folks, is actually eliminates your freedom of speech. That's what it is. Today, because most Americans are clueless about any of the plans to change their entire political system, every U.S. agency is committed to sustainable development. That's the byword they use for communitarianism. And we all take orders from the Department of Homeland Security. Well, by now, you are probably saying to yourself, what in the world is going on? What is she talking about? If you are the people who are doing this, you are probably saying, how did she find out? As mentioned earlier in this article, we were all educated about this new world order many years ago by one of our members, but all of us decided to not pay attention. And now here we are in the real world. We turn a deaf ear towards it because it seemed unreal at the time, like a sci-fi movie. Do you think it will go away if we ignore it again? The answer to that question is, of course, no. It won't go away, but the process will be completed if it is not stopped. Now, this next paragraph is a lifeline to protecting our state and national constitutions from destruction from destruction by communitarian law. Read it slowly and carefully. Communitarian rules, regulations, and directives balance individual civil rights against the health and safety of the global community. This is the new supreme law. Since nobody can define what exactly the common good is, it's just nebulous, you see. What is it? It's a big word. It encompasses a lot, you see. The new system grants a dictatorship right to create enforcement to unelected, appointed councils and their international advisors. It's basically a free press to write and enforce any new law they want, no matter how stupid. It's properly balancing rights. It will automatically overrule all national and state constitutional laws that protect individual liberty. That's the price we pay for security, you see. What price? You don't have any freedom anymore, folks. If you're not sure if your legislator is supporting communitarian laws versus constitutional laws, start reading the bills he or she writes, sponsors, and supports. Be sure to pay attention to how they vote or not vote. Make a note of how they speak about a bill or issue you are supporting or against a bill or issue you are opposing to. Look at the language used in the bill. Does it have a communitarian law sound to it? And then go to the witnesses list on those bills to see who is in support of it and who is against it. Notice the names and the groups supporting or not supporting this bill. If you see a pattern of voting against bills that are constitutionally friendly, That will begin to give you an indication of who is supporting the Constitution and who is not. Also, do some background checking on the careers of your legislators, all of them seeking to be hired by you or seeking to keep their jobs, you see. Find out what they believe in, what religion they practice, who they hang out with after hours. Read, listen, and watch the news. What groups do they belong to? Know your legislators. Next paragraph. Each one of us should know who our local legislators in the House and Senate are and who they are on the national level. We should know what their platform of issues is. We should know what they are promising to do for us and then check to see if they have supported or accomplished these promises in the past. Compare this process to a job interview. Our legislators are applying for the job of representing us on a local and national level. What they vote on determines how we live and survive. If we do not hire the right legislators to perpetrate our values and support our way of life and survival requirements, then we are going to pay the penalty. If we feel comfortable living in a community that can fund and foreclose on our housing, then you are going to look for and support a legislator that supports communitarian law. If you still believe in constitutional law, then you will support a legislator willing to stand up for our Constitution and be counted on no matter what, no matter how much money is given to him or her by special interest groups, and no matter how much a lobbyist hired to destroy our Constitution whispers in his or her ear. You see, here's a link to help you with that. That is usa.gov/contact/elected.shtml. Go to your town hall meetings and ask the hard questions and then follow up to see what they are really doing about your concerns and your problems. Check out their businesses to see how they advertise and who they're trying to attract at their websites. If they feel strongly about what you feel strongly about, it will be on their websites. Meet with them privately and discuss the issues you care about to see what they say to you. What are your neighbors saying about the candidate's work, past or current? What are they saying about their experience with the candidate? Is the legislator or candidate reaching out to meet with them or you? Are they returning phone calls? Is their correspondence an individual letter or email to you or a boilerplate response? How have they responded to your request for a bill or support for a bill you are supporting? Have they personally called you and talked to you, or are you always talking to their staff? Do you know anyone in your district that have actually reached out and helped, or have they actually reached out and helped you with a problem you were having? Try to get their donors list, because more than likely their loyalty is going to be with their donors, especially the highest ones to pay them. If they pass your test and spread the word, you have a good legislator. Help them get reelected. If they don't pass the test, spread the word and make sure he or she is replaced by someone else that will represent and assist you. We must start holding our legislator accountable for what they were sent to do in the state capitals or to Washington to do, and that is to serve us, we the people, not special interest groups. One man, one woman, one vote. We still have that power. Ms. Raapano states in her What is Communitarian Law article that in spite of all the debates over the Constitution versus the war on terror, many national citizens hold firm to their national laws. They were intended to protect individuals from corrupt international lower level government agencies. Good thing they don't know any more than what their healthy institutes tell them. The whole system will collapse if American voters understood communitarian law is international law. The very real and pressing problem with the actual law and its founding, that is the founding of Hegel and Marx's legal concepts. Its imposition of communitary law in the United States violates the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution. In 2006, I reviewed the Texas Uniform Plan Community Act, TUPCA, and created a blog at such and such, in which I read the entire act and commented on the potholes in it. This proposal act gives you an insight into what to expect from them. So if you want to look at this particular deal, you go to http www.dthetupcarebew.com. This proposed act gives you insight to what to expect from communitarian law as it relates to living in a master planned community. Advocates were able to shut down anything with name tuple on it. However, we did not shut down the concept, so the threat is now a chameleon. Additional information from Mrs. Raapano article states, The new law represents a one world government with many branches of unseen power. Their new civil society rules comes from many different sources. Some come down the traditional roads from our state and federal Congress. Others come via presidential executive orders. Still others are buried inside trade and development agreements, memorandums, resolutions, and initiatives. Sometimes the law, just because the new mission statement of a federal, state, government agency, which then proceeds to adopt and enforce communitarian laws without ever explaining the legal concept to the victims of the new enforcement actions. National and state justices have a prime role in implementing the new laws, and lawyers who establish communitarian presidency and case laws are extremely important tools. Most American attorneys who defend common clients accused of communitarian crimes are far too uneducated and unprepared to present an adequate defense. Ladies and gentlemen, do the best two sentences of the above paragraph ring a bell? If you have been following this homeowners association foreclosure rights battle, you will immediately recognize that the case law Inwood, INWOOD versus Harris 736 S.W.2D633, and in brackets it says TEX.1987, is such a case law that it is at the core of our foreclosure problem here in Texas. Other states have their origins of foreclosure created by communitarian law, in which the supporters of this type law skirt around the constitution of that state, just like what happened in Texas. Once it has been approved by the national government or their appointed representatives, supreme global law totally controls the lives and activities of the common people. It assumes collectively state ownership of all common land. It regulates and directs all production. That's communism right there, folks. It directs all commands right there. It also regulates and directs consumption and trade. Communitarian law governs the international marketplace and everything and everyone in it. Advanced American lawyers are taught lovely slogans on how to negotiate international deals within their local communities. In that little backward, war-torn country called Serbia, their law students are taught the primary sources of community law are establishing contracts, international agreements among EU member states, and international agreements between community and non-member states of an international organization. Secondary legislation of the EU are regulations, directives, decisions, recommendations, and opinions. Guess what? Homeowners associations are already telling you how to use your property via bonds. You see, bonds. If you don't put something in your property and you didn't get approval, they're starting to put cameras on down sewage drains. You see, a eyewitness report by a homeowner told me this one to measure your uses so you can be properly taxed. Can you believe this? You can believe what they told the eyewitness if you want, that the camera was to see where the blockage took place. If it were to happen, they, that is law enforcement, are already coming into our homes to nosy around under the assumption of verifying wrongdoing, when in fact they are checking your energy sources, folks, according to the eyewitness. And what better way to do all this than to put you in a homeowners association so that you can be monitored without drawing suspicion to the agency seeking this information. That is correct. Makes perfect sense. There are people who live in what I call a gated community, and I believe that that's another way of them being able, they put themselves into that jurisdiction. Have you started to feel sick yet? Then let's keep going with the following. In the U.S., there are many varieties of communitarian law, and often they are not defined as such. The key to identifying an unconstitutional communitarian law is a new law that curtails individual liberty in the name of the community or the common good. Again, common good just has a whole, what is common good? You see, it's whatever the majority says. You see, these and any other terms that define America as a collective or part of the global community are communist communitarian terms used to trick free people into becoming slaves for the state. Protecting the common good and promoting democracy was the goal of the international communists in the late 19th century. I'll say that again. Protecting the common good and promoting democracy was the goal of the international communists in the late 19th century. And it is the exact same ultimate goal of the emerging more moral world government. Communitarian law is also called international development law. Mrs. Raapano offers further reading into this subject. What is the Rule of Law by Helen Y.U. and Alison, A-L-I-S-O-N, Guersey, G-U-E-R-N-S-E-Y, at the University of Iowa Center for Finance and International Development. The U.S. is being merged into the Council of Foreign Relations, plan to eliminate the U.S. under a new regional government called the North American Union. The model legislation for this integration policy is the EU, but you see also CAFTA, the EU, and the communitarian laws. While the rest of the world is handing out master degrees in communitarian law, the U.S., home of the free and the brave, hasn't gotten the first clue what's happening to their beloved rule of law. Many Americans point to one law or another, like the Patriot Act, as treason, but they never identify these unconstitutional laws for what they really are, which also means there is no organized attempt, none whatsoever, to identify and expose the communitarian law as treacherous actions against the legitimate government, i.e., this is a silent coup, folks. This is what I'm saying. I just said it. This is a silent coup. So she says the people, American attorneys, refuse to even discuss it with their own clients who've been charged with communitarian crimes. Maybe we all need to take the new laws more seriously. People, you may not have gotten it yet, but the following excerpt from the article by Nikki Raapano may enlighten you further. All communitarian systems evolve slowly under careful and stealthy manipulation. See the Fabian Socius. National political evolution is a completely bogus theory founded on nothing but the elitist pipe dreams. All political changes in the world today are orchestrated and played out by carefully trained dialectic thinkers. This includes all acts of terrorism dating back before the 18th century. The thinkers' academic lineage is unbroken and can be traced directly to their modernized factions. Communitarianism has posed as Islamic fundamentalists, posed as Christian ministers, posed as New Age gurus, posed as right-wing Aryan militias, gangs, drug dealers, American attorneys, and art students. If we look close enough, we can see almost every elected or represented U.S. has embraced communitarianism. Most obvious changes are in the department structures of the federal bureaucracy. The proposal military tribunals are communitarian in makeup, and all public discussion of this will include the term balancing, and insists there is a debate between individual liberty and natural law. But the actual terms of the debate will never make the legal rounds for constitutional amendments, you see. Congress alone is being asked to make the final dialectic choice between individual freedom and national security, you see. I'll say that again. Congress alone is being asked to make the final dialectic choice between individual freedom and national security. Yet, as many simple one can understand, a nation's forum to protect individual liberty would make protecting individual liberty the highest form of national security. Americans can interpret every action their federal government takes to ensure national security actually protects the international security of the emerging supranational global government. This enormous system has so many levels and so many organizations, their names would fill the NYC telephone book. It's in New York City. Regular citizens who attempt a redress of grievances from the global governments will never make it through the maze of officers who keep sending them someplace else. Everyone on the bottom of the system is only following orders. I continue to read Nikki Raapano's article, What is Communitarian Law? Because I realized not only was my member right, but here was an article that explained what the communitarian law is with evidence to back it up. It then becomes my duty to write this article and help spread the word. I kept reading a few more paragraphs, and here's what I would continue to read. Since way back before World War I, Europe has been the testing ground for creating the legal structure. All the courts, councils, and revised constitutions have to be completely operational and effective before the final implementation of community law in the United States. The rejection of the European community by the French and Dutch voters in 2005 granted a short window of opportunity to the American people wishing to restore their national supremacy of law. It would surely follow historical precedents if the American people once again insisted in attaining their individual freedoms from the attaining their individual freedom from the empire by the Netherlands and France. Let me take a water break here, folks. The European Union is a Western democratic model for establishing a world government. China and Russia are the Eastern models. The most relevant models for the establishment of a global federation may be the European Union, which politically unites a large group of widely diverse, some formerly hostile nations spread over a large geographic area. The EU, which is still evolving, already has many attributes of federal government, such as open internal borders, directly elected parliament, a court system, and a centralized economy plan. The EU lead is being followed by the African Union, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and the South American Community Nations. A multitude of regional associations are gravitating. More nations of the world are at different stages of development towards a growing extent of economic and sometimes political integration. I am a writer who has written about foreclosures and HOAs over the years. However, I thought it was time for me to write about what we are headed towards, unless I should say unless we understand communitarian law is international law and worthy of repeating twice, the very real and pressuring problem with the actual law and its founding, part of the Hegelian Marxist legal concepts, is imposition of communitarian law in the United States violates the Supreme Clause of the United States. It's time to get out of Facebook for a moment. Everybody and smell the Constitution. Our constitutional law is headed towards total and permanent elimination as a useless law. I don't know about you, but I like having constitutional law around. I'm going to be looking everywhere for my Constitution. I'm not going to let it get snatched from me without a fight. What about you? It does not matter what age you are, what color you are, and what nationality you are, what political party you belong to, how much education you have, what sex you are, your married or married, whether or not you have children, how busy you are, what your religion is, your profession, or how much money you make and have. The common denominator is that you are in the United States living on this soil, and you should be just as concerned as I am about this news becoming that is news because communitarian law will change your life. If you are reading this and are part of the problem, you should rethink your role in their overriding our constitutional law. If you like what you read here, why not share it with others? Let's get the word out and see if we can stop the robbery while in progress. And don't forget, foreclosing for maintenance fees by homeowners associations must stop, and no mandatory homeowner association at closing. We are a country of choices, and I think that is worth fighting for. That is, do yourself and our Constitution a favor and send this article to your family, friends, and business associates. Together, let's start educating our country, or we are going to lose our Constitution, both local and national, and life as we know it. Remember, the key to defeating this is understanding what communitarian law really is. I'm just one of the messengers. Why don't you start a dialogue on this by posting a comment so others may see and share your thoughts? Start connecting the dots to what you have read here to what you are witnessing in your life. And let us stop this thing together. A very special thanks to Nikki Raapano for our awesome article, What is Communitarian Law? And to my member and why witnesses for the contribution to this article. I'm going to take a break now. There's going to be another section here. I'll be talking about Texas leans towards communitarians by Joe Deaton, but I'm going to stop right now. I need to take a break. I'll be back in probably about 10 minutes, okay? Hope you understand.